You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible.
Week. Now, Senator Jon Ossoff, he pressed Neera Tanden, President Joe Biden's pick to lead his budget office during her Senate confirmation hearing about funding for HBCUs. Now, during Tuesday's hearing, the Democratic senator discussed the importance of HBCUs and how they are, quote, gems in our nation's higher education system. Here's more of what he had to say.
Georgia hosts some of the most renowned historically black colleges and universities in the country. And HBCUs play a vital role, not just serving the black community, but as gems in our nation's higher education system. Will you commit to working with my office to ensure that as the administration develops its budget request in upcoming years, that the needs of HBCUs are proportionally represented and well represented in the president's budget request?
Senator, as a candidate, President Biden did discuss the vital role HBCUs play in amongst higher education institutions, on equity, from an equity perspective in higher education, and essentially wealth building over the long term. And so it is a priority for the president and the vice president, and I would welcome the opportunity to work with you on those issues in support of HBCUs and the vital role that they play.
So last week, we reported that the Maryland Senate passed a measure for a $577 million settlement to a long-running lawsuit involving Maryland's 4 HBCUs, which included Coppin State University, Morgan State, Bowie State, and the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. In 2006, a lawsuit was filed that alleged Maryland underfunded those 4 HBCUs. Now, as someone who graduated from one of those HBCUs, Morgan State University to be exact, I knew the school lacked resources when I was attending. I knew it was underfunded. And in order for me to compete with journalism students attending the PWIs in the state, including Towson and University of Maryland College Park, I knew I had to work 3 times as hard as those students to even be able to compete in the workforce. Now, Michael, I want to start with you. HBCUs have been getting the short end of the stick for a while now, but do you think the Biden administration will really cater to HBCUs?
I think there will be more of a sensitivity to HBCUs, especially being that you have Kamala Harris, who's a graduate of Howard University. So now part of this also, because the White House submits the budget to the legislative branch of government. And it's approved in Congress. So I think in the White House, I think there will be a greater sensitivity, even a greater sensitivity than under the Obama administration, because one of the criticisms under the Obama administration was that you didn't have anybody, if I remember correctly, you didn't have anybody in the cabinet who graduated from an HBCU. This is one of the criticisms. There wasn't that sensitivity. And then also, even though I think it was inadvertent, I don't think when they changed the Parent Plus loan program to look back 7 years in the parents' credit history, and it had a devastating impact on HBCUs. It wasn't something, from my understanding of this, it wasn't something specifically done to hurt HBCUs because it was all across the board. But what HBCU presidents were saying, and HBCU Digest, there were numerous articles written in HBCU Digest about this, the HBCU presidents were saying, you did not consult with us first before you made this change to see how this would impact us, okay? So I think with Vice President Kamala Harris and probably others, I think you'll have a greater sensitivity in the White House. So we'll have to see what happens in the legislative branch of government, in the House and the Senate.
Candace, do you agree with Michael?
You know, definitely. I mean, Joe Biden is definitely going to be more sensitive to the issue because that was his platform. Let's end the racial disparity. So when we talk about racial disparity, we were talking about legacy and wealth building. And when we talk about legacy, we are talking about HBCUs, which historically, which is why they exist. They existed because of the fact that this was the way that African Americans were able to get educated and try to close that wealth gap, one that is just far beyond what we want it to be. But certainly, President Joe Biden knows the level of expectation, not only because he ran on that and because Black people came to the table and voted for him, but because of the fact that, like Michael said, he's got someone that went to an HBCU, understands the value of it, and understands what it means to be in college and how that affects legacy. And that's what we're looking at overall, legacy. The folks that we see out on the streets that are making it and aren't making it, it all has to do with what came before them. So when we can build that foundation, I am hoping that the president understands that that's a foundation that we need in order to move up.
Now, Mustafa, if the Biden administration doesn't step up, what is something that HBCUs can do in order to get the funding they need?
Well, we're going to have to work with public-private partnerships. But first of all, we should not let Biden or members of Congress off the hook for making the investments. And the reason being is because you can't build back better without making sure that the alumni and those current students who are part of our HBCUs are not a critical part of that. The STEM programs and all these other programs that are going to be so critically important for us to be able to meet the need that the president has put out. The second part of that is that, we should also be making sure that as the rest of the cabinet is filled out in the second and third level positions, that it's filled with individuals who have the sets of experiences who come from HBCUs, because there's a certain set of competencies that come with that education and those sets of experiences, which also will be critically important. And then again, the presidents can work with a number of others, whether it's foundations or whether it is in the corporate world, to make sure that they are also living up to this moment. There is a cultural shift that has happened in our country, and you have to make the investments both in the people and in the resources that are necessary for both the sets of challenges that we have in front of us and a huge set of opportunities.
Now, Michael, I'm sure this is an obvious question, but would you say the underfunding of HBCUs is just a bigger ploy to get rid of them?
I think that's part of it, to get rid of them, but also sometimes now historically, oftentimes you had, sometimes Republicans that may have been more of an advocate for funding HBCUs. Also, that's something else. But I think a lot today you have a push to underfund them. One, to get rid of them, but also a lot of people don't know, beyond the African American community, a lot of people don't know the importance of HBCUs as well, beyond, African American. So at the same time, the real value of HBCUs, I really think needs to be promoted. The percentage of doctors and attorneys and public school teachers, like about 50% of African American public school teachers and something like 80% of judges.
Looks like we lost Michael. Candace, now Michael was making a good point that a lot of people don't have an understanding of the importance of HBCUs or the value that they have. Can you speak to the value of an HBCU and why they're necessary?
Oh, sure. Well, hey, first let me start by saying I went to Howard University. So the importance and value of going to an HBCU is that there are certain experiences, there are certain things that you do as a student where you're not interrupted by this whole idea of trying to negotiate who you are in terms of your race, which is often the case when you go to a mall or to a restaurant or to any place where you are specifically the O&O, the one and only somewhere. So you go to an HBCU, not only do you not have to deal with that, but you're able to build other skills in place of that, okay? So that you don't have those stressors. You don't have to be competitive with the world in a way that you used to. And when you take that off of you, it shifts. It allows you to open yourself to do other things. And I just want to comment on something that you said earlier when you said, hey, what are the options if this doesn't happen in terms of the HBCUs that don't get the money? Let us not underestimate the power of sororities and fraternities. That leads us back to Kamala Harris once again, in terms of what they can do in order to make some magic happen. I know that there are thousands of people who are listening today who understand the power of those sororities and fraternities to get together and shift and make movement and turn over possibly an idea that that this could never happen, or if something doesn't happen, to make it happen. They do have a lot of power and a pipeline to Kamala, who seems to be open to that. I mean, certainly she better. She's got a lot of sorority sisters that are looking for her to pick up that phone at the other end.
Yeah, very true, Candace. Now, Mustafa, before we go to break, do you have any last words you'd like to say about this?
Yeah, so we can't even deal with the paradigm of if they are not, because it should be an impossibility for them not to make the investments now. And here's what I mean by that. Joe Biden, in part of his executive orders, has talked about a full equity analysis of all the resources and policy decisions that are happening inside the federal government. So, and then we also know, let's say in the environmental and climate context, that they're dedicating $2 trillion in that space. So how much of those dollars are actually going to go to HBCUs? How much of your resources at both CDC and HHS and a number of the other scientific departments and agencies are now going to go to make the investments to build the critical infrastructure inside of our HBCUs so that they can fully compete with PWI universities, which we know have huge endowments and get all kinds of money that's coming in. So it is, in my mind, it is an impossibility, but we have to hold the accountability in the process of them not making significant investments inside of HBCUs.
Yes. Now, Michael, I hear you're back. If you can just finish your statement.
Repeat the question. I forgot.
You were talking about the value. The issue is that a lot of people don't have the understanding of the value.
Oh, yeah, nationwide. And a lot of this has to do with also just people in general, just Americans in general being ignorant of history as well. I mean, Betsy DeVos didn't know what an HBCU was. And before Trump became president, I'm not even sure he knew what an HBCU was. So really talking about the legacy of HBCUs, why they're still relevant today. And also the other thing is that you have, even though the majority of students at HBCUs are African Americans, they also service, other populations as well. But they're critical when we deal with scientists, African American scientists, doctors, attorneys, judges, public school teachers, et cetera. They're crucial for that. So really championing the successes, the success stories and the legacies of HBCUs, I think, all across the country, outside of the African-American community, I think is extremely important.
And I totally agree with you, being that I have experience attending an HBCU and then going to a PWI for graduate school. Totally two different experiences, and I had the understanding of why HBCUs exist and are necessary.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.